But we are going to have a talk about something tough, about Hindu genocides, about something that affects a country right now, but most of us aren't aware about.
This is such a topic which is not being discussed in academia.
At what point does a quantum physicist decide about Hindumisia, talking about the Hindu genocide?
He was one of my close friends and he just dismissed my concern.
Why aren't they covering these things? Why are they repelled from their own history?
Because they have some agenda of promoting, let's say, some unity.
What if you're a victim of a propaganda written by a different community, not the ones that are taught in school?
And if you're writing this for 12 years, at least, let's say, then obviously you will form an opinion because you read that kind of literature for 12 years in your adolescence phase.
Why scrape the past over and over again?
Then I'm leaving it to you, whether it was a genocide or not.
You're not relevant until you win. The winners are the ones who write the truth.
Two truths can never be at anomaly with each other. Right. Indian culture is not that kind of culture. Let's say Pakistani culture there, okay? let's get a good bakra.
As someone who lives in the current time, it's hard for me to digest that
Now, this is a very big question. Acknowledging Hindu genocide is the first and foremost step towards decolonization of India. You cannot extract history from ashes.
This is fun. I could talk hours about this topic. I'm Vinayak Mishra, and welcome to the first podcast of the Indic Thought Forum, where we have Dr. Bijeet Prasantha, a person from an extremely diverse background, from IIT Delhi में B.Tech to PhD in Quantum Chromodynamics. I will outsource the intro to him itself, but we are going to have a talk about something tough, about Hindu genocides, about something that affects a country right now, but most of us aren't aware about. So, Dr. Bijeet Prasantha, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, I am Bijeet. So I did my B.Tech from IIT Delhi in engineering physics. Then I went on to do a PhD in theoretical particle physics. Specifically the topic was quantum chromodynamics. And then I came back, joined finance. Meanwhile, I wrote this book, History of Hindumisia and Hindu Genocides. And so we are here to discuss this book pretty much, right? And the contemporary topics related to this book, so to say.
Okay. Before we deep dive into the book, I'm particularly very curious. What is quantum chromodynamics? I've not heard about the domain.
Right. So, you see, chrome in color, right? So, chromodynamics is dynamics of color. So it's basically if you try to break proton or neutron, you will get something more fundamental than proton or neutron, right? I mean, proton and neutron, they are not fundamental elementary particle. So there are quarks. Right. So canonically, there are like 3 quarks in proton, 3 in neutron. In proton, there are 2 up, 1 down. In neutron, you have 1 up, 2 down. So these are just the convention I'm saying. But how these quarks and how they talk to each other. So like 2 electrons, they talk to each other through photon. These quarks, they talk to each other through something called gluon. So the whole dynamics of quarks and gluons, this area is called quantum chromodynamics. And even beyond that, if you want a much bigger picture, so there are like 4 kind of fundamental forces. One is gravity, right. Strong force, weak force, and electromagnetic force. So for example, friction, it's an electromagnetic force, right? Because there are layers of electrons which are actually, the electromagnetic force between them are creating the force called friction. You have gravity, which is intuitive and non-intuitive, and probably the most easy and the most difficult sort of kind of force to sort of understand. Strong force is the area which is related to quantum chromodynamics. So the forces between, let's say, 2 proton, like they are positively charged particle, but they are confined within a small volume of nucleus. Like if they are both positively charged, they should repel each other. But at the same time, there should be some attractive force which should actually, which should over-dominate that repulsion, electromagnetic repulsion. So that dynamics, that force is called strong force. And the physics to understand strong force is quantum chromodynamics.
This is fun. I could talk
right.
hours about this topic. But
sure.
This also sparks another question. IIT Delhi, Carnegie Mellon, and investment banking. at what point does a quantum physicist decide about Hindumisia, talking about the Hindu genocide?
Right. So there was a time, I think a couple of years ago, I was having a conversation with one of my friends who was a fellow physics PhD student. And I told him, see, there are countless Abrahamic invasion on India, and there might be a religious and genocidal motivation behind that. Now, my friend, I mean, he was one of my close friends, and he just dismissed my concern. At that point, I realized this is such a topic which is not being discussed in academia. That's why, like, let's say the doctorate and the most educated class of India, they don't know much about this topic because it is not there in the academic literature, so to say. So then I made my determination that I will write a book with proper academic rigor, with, let's say, first-hand references, proper research, so that on the thesis of Hindu genocide, at least there is one literature, at least there is one book which people can read, understand, go to the references, check the references, and understand, okay, on the thesis of Hindu genocide, how much that are being said are true, how much are false. In the age of misinformation, right, it is very easy to get dissuaded by false information, because from every spectrum of politics, and India is a multi-party democracy, so everyone is peddling their own sort of narrative for their own interest. From there, right, we need, in order to counter the misinformation or whatever truth is there, we need a book of academic rigor, a work of academic rigor. Hence, I wrote this book.
But another question that I want to ask is, you mentioned that these people are literate folks, and these are the people who run behind sources, run behind actual facts. Why would they be repelled to talk about such things when they can talk about multiple other topics? Let's not name them, but if they are the people who are supposed to be the flame bearers of multiple topics that we talk about, why aren't they covering these things? Why are they repelled from their own history?
Right, and now this is a very big question, and it has been going on for, let's say, 2000 years. Peddling lies is not a new thing. A lot of other Abrahamic cults have already done that and have excelled at that. Like, for example, let's say New York, right? In New York, you go and one day you burn all the libraries in New York. You burn all the museums. You burn all the artwork and books. And obviously, probably all the administrative records, let's say, right? Now, 10 years, 20 years later, you start promoting something else. Let's say Indian culture there, okay? Indian culture is not that kind of culture. Let's say Pakistani culture there, okay? let's get a good bakra. Okay? Let's say some bunch of Pakistani went there, burned and did all these things, and now the point is, past, so to say, it does not have an objective existence like present, right? So you see the past through books, through records, through marvelous, let's say, works by various artisans. If everything is destroyed, then what is left is a bunch of ashes. Zero information there. You cannot extract history from ashes. Now, so what happened with India for, let's say, 1,000 years, especially, let's say, in North India, was most of the temples, great works of art, universities, they were burned to ashes. And then, post-independence, there was there was an Indian state that obviously probably Indian people and the contemporary politics tried to sort of establish, which tried to avoid these uncomfortable facts. Now, if, let's say, the Indian state, they write a history book in which they don't mention about these destructions, right? Because they have some agenda of promoting, let's say, some unity, right? Or avoid any unnecessary conflict, as per their opinion. You would never know this history. Now, on top of that, if you try to promote some other agenda, for example, all these invasions are actually, they are positive forces. They brought some positive changes. Then over time, you will start believing that, okay, whatever was there in ancient India was probably very primal and primitive. And we needed a change because we were, suffering for 1,000 years. And then some powerful force came from outside. We changed India, right? Gave us railways, gave us Taj Mahal. If that is taught to you, and if you are writing this for 12 years, at least, let's say, then obviously you will form an opinion because you read that kind of literature for 12 years in your adolescence phase, and that will make opinion. Now, if you are in some other sector, let's say you are doing a job or you are doing a PhD in physics, let's say, you would take those facts for granted most of the time. You would not try to dig them. Actually, if this is true, because as a person from academia, they believe in books, right?
Right.
That's their Aradhya, that's their Saraswati. And if lies are written in books, it's very difficult. And if that is not in your domain, let's say, it is very difficult to understand. And then Hindus for thousands of years, the way they have been treated, it has led to a certain kind of zimmihood, a zimmi mind in Hindu, which probably led us to believe we should not talk about this. First of all, we should not reflect on the worst phase in our history. We should not reflect on where we went wrong, because it shows us in poor light before the world. And we should not pursue these things because it is contrary to, let's say, the unity of the country. So for all these various complicated reasons, and obviously due to the thrust from the state, we did not dig it up. The problem here is when you don't dig it up and you start promoting falsehood, right? You cannot base your civilization on falsehood. Because let's say in Indian Shastra, right, you have, let's say, two truths. If you have a complete picture, two truths can never be at anomaly with each other.
Right.
Because truth is it's like a tree, right? There is one universal truth, let's say Rita, and from there all truths are branching out. So it's coming from the same tree. But falsehood are not necessarily from the same tree. So it is very unlikely two falsehood for eternity will coexist with each other. So because you are promoting falsehood in the guise of niceness, this is leading to anomaly in our culture, in our society, in our nation, in the way we think, in the way we critically judge our let's say recreational activities, how we talk, how we treat each other. So it is very important we accept those truths. It is not necessarily out of enmity for anything. It's just knowing the truth, right? That's why we need to know the truth. And that's why probably it was hidden from us.
I think I'm convinced, but you mentioned 3 points as to why the academic folks wouldn't want to dig into our own history. You mentioned about hiding and burning knowledge factories. You mentioned about propaganda to hide the facts, and also covering it up, the government covering things up to promote unity. And you also mentioned that the truth is written, or you didn't mention it, but it's a common quote that you're not relevant until you win. The winners are the ones who write the truth. But if the past is always written by winners, who to believe in? Where can we get the objective truth from? What if I ask you, what if you're a victim of a propaganda written by a different community, not the ones that are taught in school?
Right, that's a good point. Right, now to understand that, you have to go to the primary record. Right, obviously there are various ruins, historical ruins. You go, you do survey of them. There are ample amount of literature coming from, let's say, the Ashrafi historian, so all these invaders who came, they brought with them a historian like Al-Udbi, for example. There was a guy like Al-Biruni, who was apparently a tourist here. Barani. Then there was this Minas Siraj.
You have quoted a lot of them in the book.
I have quoted all of them. And they are writing exactly how it happened. And much of the things, as they are describing are matching with the history of India as we know it, right? So if you say that, okay, some part are matching as it is and some part they are saying actually are false, it does not make sense. And then you see the historical residue of these things in various places. Then you have account like Dharmaswami. Dharmaswami was a Tibetan monk who came to India in 1234 AD, right after the destruction of Nalanda and Odantapuri and Vikramshila and all these places. Now, Dharmaswami, okay, so Nalanda got destroyed probably around 1198 AD, right? And obviously, the Marxist historian are saying ki, for example, they are saying Brahmins destroyed it, right? Now, there is a guy who is coming from Tibet to learn something. He's staying in Nepal and he's writing, no one dare to go from there to, let's say, to cross the Ganges river, to go to Bihar and really see what is going on, because there is this whole Mohammedan invasion and goons are there. He came there, he wrote about it, he went back to Tibet in his own language, right? Most probably it is not propaganda, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you ask me very strictly, okay, so, I mean, really can I know the past? Again, past does not have any objective existence. What we can do, we can have some scientific principles like Occam's razor. So what is Occam's razor? So I must tell you a very interesting history here. So in Europe, they used to believe that the Earth is at the center of the cosmos, and the moon, the sun, and every planet and every star is rotating around it. So this was the model of so-called Ptolemy, right? In Ptolemy's model, they could explain everything, but there were either they were using more number of parameters, they are complicated things, right? So for example, there was this motion of planet like Saturn, for example, right? Because it was a, what do you call it? It was, so it was not a very smooth trajectory, so to say. But you could still explain it with Ptolemy's. You just needed more number of parameters. But then when, let's say, other people came, Newton, for example, in Europe, he says, okay, there is a easier model than that. Like, let's assume that the Earth is not at the center of the universe. And that could explain everything very easily with one more principle, which is the law of gravitation, right? So that is Occam's razor. You try to explain it in the most simple way possible. And if it can be explained in the most simplest form, probably it is how it happened or it happens in nature. So these are scientific principles that we use even in physics. So here also I am using Occam's razor. And again, this is not just one event I am describing. I am describing for, let's say, from 318 AD, the time of Constantine the Great, till Operation Searchlight 1971, and then after a whole lot of massacres, right? So for this almost 2000 years of history, I am telling you, okay, these are the primary records that are saying about these facts, without giving any opinion about it. So then you judge what is the thesis that is coming out of it, right? I am not writing in every page that, okay, some genocide happens. Initially, I gave you the definition of genocide as per the United Nations Convention as defined by Raphael Lemkin. And then I am quoting from the first-hand sources, scriptures, what was the motivation, what did they say, the invaders, how much people or cattle or temples were wiped out from this country. And then I am leaving it to you, whether it was a genocide or not.
It's clever, very clever, I'll give you that, to use their own records to make a point that they tried to, extrapolate about.
Right.
But before scratching the surface and getting into facts, you have mentioned hopefully a thorough documentation and a dispassionate analysis of the dark side of Indian history as done in this book will help us to retrospect about what exactly went wrong that ought not to be repeated ever again in India. My question to you is, what's the point of retracing history like this when, it's going to leave a sour taste in the mouth? Why worry about the past when we have the future to take care of, when we have so many other issues to take care of? Why didn't you choose to write about healthcare, about the infrastructure, administrative system? Why scrape the past over and over again?
Right. So first of all, it's not so this nation has like 1.4 billion people. And even me, I am doing all sorts of work. I am doing physics, finance, everything. And then I wrote this book. So it's not like we are focusing on one thing with a very political motivation. I don't have any political motivation, and probably I won't have it ever in my life. Okay, I'm just writing it with first-hand references like a historian does, because when I noticed this topic, I saw there's a book missing in this topic. So as a doctorate, my work was, okay, there is a missing part. I need to either work on it or write on it or create a theory or write a book on it. This is what I did. This is how I work. I found that this is a very big topic, grand topic, on which I could work on for 2 years. And that's what I did. Right? Different people are working on, let's say, health sector, finance, economics, and sciences. And then some of them are writing the history books as well, right? That's what I did. And then there was another part of your question, right?
Yeah, it was why not focus on administrative stuff, and why even go for the history?
Right. So why don't focus on the administrative stuff? Now, one of the conclusion of this book is that acknowledging Hindu genocide is the first and foremost step towards decolonization of India. Because you see, the Indian state was founded, the modern Indian state, quote unquote, in 1947, based on partisan genocide. Right? And there are people who are saying, both parties as in Hindus and Muslims are equally responsible for these things. But wait a second. Was there a Hindu doctrine behind this? Did Hindu consider it as a spiritual task put on them to divide the country? Right? Was there any doctrine in the, let's say, Muslim side or let's say other sides? Ashraf side, for example. You need to answer those questions, uneasy, uncomfortable question, because the Indian state, with all its wings, right, legislation, police, voting machineries and all these things, right, media, they are actually consciously or subconsciously, they have been an accomplice in Hindu genocide. And we will discuss it over time, right, in this podcast, where I will gradually prove to you that all these machineries are accomplices of Hindu genocide. Probably the native Indians are not responsible for it, because it is the structure that was provided to us. I have mentioned about W. Hunter, his book Indian Musalman, Are They Bound to Rebel Against the Queen? That sort of book. So W. Hunter, for example, was a IAS officer, so to say, who wrote 9-volume book about India on how to run the administrative services in India. And there he is commenting on how to rule Hindus, how to rule Muslims, whom to take side on, what to do, what are the inherent nature of Hindus, that they cannot politically unite, they cannot they cannot create chaos, they don't have stoutness of their heart like Muslims. इतना गुर्दा नहीं है हिंदू में, इसलिए मुस्लिम का साइड लेके फिर हिंदुओं पे राज करना है. If this is the structure that has been provided to the Indian administrative service, right? When British are writing, for example, about law, they are writing, let's use the Shariat, but Shariat is very brutal, so we won't be that brutal. वो थोड़ा काट छाट कर देंगे, थोड़ा स्मूथ बना के, let's use it as the Government of India Act. So when these sort of things are happening, when these sort of comments are coming, you dig the literature, you see how they want to rule the country, and you will see the picture, what is going on in the mind of those people who are creating the modern India, so to say. And the motivation will be very clear, how to rule the Hindus, how to rule these people, which people, the native people, who are basically the Hindus, right? Most of them are Hindus. Then it will be clear to you what was actually going on, and and all these structures, how this administration, for example, how it has been founded and formed on the basis of Hindu hatred. Okay, so knowing that is important in order to even make some positive change and some progress, even in the administrative services. So that's why you need to study the Hindumisia and Hindu genocides.
Interesting. I'd love to know what exactly are the sources, because as someone who lives in the current time, it's hard for me to digest that the writings of, based on which the administration of India runs would be influenced by the Sharia law, would be influenced by people who want to use a particular community and their writings over the other community. It doesn't make sense. Isn't it supposed to be of unity? Isn't it supposed to be of taking everyone together? Like, what are the sources that you referred that helped you come to this conclusion?
That's your native Hindu mind talking, and I am very happy you think that way. But it is not necessarily true that someone who want to rule you, who want to colonize India, will think that way. You have to dig deeper to understand those people who were running the country and created so much damage. How did they think? And the best thing with the British is that whatever they thought, whatever they adopted, they wrote it explicitly. Whatever massacres happened, whatever riots happened, everything is in their record. Okay, so you have to read those work in order to understand how these people are thinking, how W. Hunter is thinking, why they are getting a fatwa from Middle East, from Arabian country, from their imam, in order to announce India Darul Aman. What is Darul Aman? Ki this country is being ruled by the British, who are the people of the book, like the Muslims, who are also people of the book. Hence, this is Darul Aman, because really the Kafirs are not ruling the country, so to say. India is being ruled by the similar-minded people, by people from the book. Hence, it makes sense to naturally unify British interest with Ashrafi interest to rule the majority Hindus. Now, if this is being written right explicitly, and these things are happening as you see, and then the so-called the struggle of Muslims against the British are actually coming down near 1870s, 1880s. You can see what was the picture that was there, what was going on. The wild plan. Sayyid Ahmed Khan is coming out in his Mirat speech. In Mirat, he is saying, really, there are two nations. At the same time, some British guy, the Viceroy, Lord Dufferin, I guess, there, I think, in Calcutta, Minto Hall probably, he is talking in the same language. The two-nation theory, divide impera, they are using the same language, same pattern, same template. So that's the point. If they are talking that way, they are talking about divide and rule. That's how the administrators are thinking. Probably the natives were not thinking that way. But natives were not the people in power. That's why you need to learn the language of those rulers in order to understand that contemporary history. Now, how they thought about it. If, let's say, there is a massacre that is going on and there is a underlying doctrine behind it, you have to understand the doctrine in order to understand how can you convince a bunch of people to let's say, exterminate a whole race. Right? When you study Hitler, you just don't study his beard. Right? I mean, from that angle, he looked very funny. You just study Nazism, their literature, you study Mein Kampf. Right? That's how you extract the history, because once you extract the motivation, then you match them, what they did. Right? I am actually doing the same thing here. I am studying those people, their mind, through their literature. That's all.
Interesting. Very interesting. When you provide sources and quote the exact statements that were made, it does have impact.
Right.
But come on now. I don't think the things that happened back then would be influencing what's happening in Bangladesh right now. I think it's a completely different scenario. Times change. I think laws adapt to, the current scenario. So do you really think what happened during, by the Razakars during Bangladesh, or, what happened to the women of the Bangladesh as the Hindu population has gone from 28 to 8% is all influenced by the things that you're talking about since the past, since independence?
So, I mean, you're saying that in Bangladesh, so whatever is going on in Bangladesh has no connection with the 1,000-year-long history of Hindu genocides?
I'd like to believe so, because times change, don't they?
So let's put it that way. So at the time of partition, the Hindu population percentage was around 28 to 32 based on various resources. Now it is less than 8%. Now what has gone wrong in these 70 years that had led to this sudden decline? One more striking example will be actually Sindh. So Sindh is a very interesting example when we consider how we lost our people and our land, a big chunk of our land. So near 19, and what I am doing right now, I am basically quoting from B.R. Ambedkar's Pakistan or the Partition of India. So there he is writing near 1930. So there's census, right, for whatever, since 1950 or 60. Near 1920, 30s, they saw, the administrators, they saw that there is a population inversion that is going on. So Hindus are gradually becoming minority in Sindh. Now then, Sindh was under Bombay presidency. So because this thing they noticed, they actually separated Sindh from Bombay presidency. And then when the partition happened, basically partition of India is partition of Punjab and partition of Bengal largely, right? And the whole genocide that happened there. In Sindh, there was no contemporary popular Hindu leader who could partition Sindh. So some Sindhis came to Mumbai and other places, but the whole Sindh was pretty much gone. And what is the percentage of Hindu population in Sindh right now? Do we have any data? I mean, in Pakistan, the Hindu population is, I think, 2 to 3% overall, right? But what is going on in Sindh? I think recently there was a report from United Nations which is claiming that there are, so every year 1,000 of girls are being converted or like through forced marriage. So they are being abducted and forcefully they are being married to some guy and converted. Then if you go to court, it is not possible to do ghar wapsi. Right? I mean, and it is happening with the Hindus as well as with the Christian movement. So how can we deny these facts, these reports, right? We have reports during the 1971 genocide about the Operation Searchlight, various media deployed from United States even, right? Even the then consulate of United States, I think his name was Archer Blood or something. He is writing mail or some telegram to US saying that there is a genocide going on. How can you neglect these facts? In fact, he used this guy Blood, right? Mr. Blood, he used the word genocide. How can you neglect all these words, right? This guy was there in Dhaka when the genocide was going on in 1971. How could you neglect that? When, let's say, there is a Pakistani brigadier who is saying that Bengali women wear sari and they dance and they sing, that's why they are slutty. Hence, we have to change the nasal of these people by raping these Bengali women. How can you counter that? It is coming from the horse's mouth. The horse that want to grope and whatever, right? I mean, kill and genocide an entire race for their very identity. How can you neglect that? That's my question. And if you read the definition of genocide, there's a mental element, physical element, and then there are some list of crimes. Doing genocide, basically giving inflammatory speeches, genocidal speeches, making groups to do genocide, and all these kind of crimes, international crimes that are being committed by Punjabi, Pakistani and Balochis, right? When Bangladesh as a nation itself is trying to declare, some genocide happens in our own country against certain section of people. How can you deny these very facts that the very state of Bangladesh is trying to acknowledge?
It's painful. It's hard. But it's all new news to me. I read a lot about Palestine. I read a lot about the atrocities in Gaza. And they're covered by reputed channels. This isn't covered. How do I validate this? How do I come to know about this? Because if such atrocities are happening, if such remarks are made by people are supposed to cause harmony, who are supposed to lead, as role models, why wasn't this covered in the news then?
Oh, why wasn't it covered in the news? Now, again, that would be a long answer, but let me try to give you a bunch of reasons, right? First of all, you have to understand that Hindus, which are the native people of this land, subcontinent, so to say, they are global minority. And the history of quote unquote pagan persecution, or the persecution of the nature worshippers, it's not a new event. I mean, the whole Roman civilization was wiped out by Christianism, right? There is no trace of paganism in Europe, in the largest part of Europe, right? There are multiple reasons, right, behind this. The first reason is that the kind of forces who are committing these kind of genocides, this is not a new thing. There is a 2000 years history of this, right? There's a long history behind this kind of design. In order to perpetrate a large scale genocide, you need to have a doctrine, a design that you must follow, and it has a common pattern as noticed by various let's say social scientists who are studying genocides. So the first part is otherization. What is otherization? The us and them. Let's say there are a group of people who are different, right? It's them, they are not us, and they are inferior to us, right? So this sort of otherization is necessary in order to create a vertical split in the society. And then through some design, some doctrine, right? Most of them are so-called doctrine of gods that say the other, they are inferior to us. So that this is the process of dehumanization. Now, for example, if you study, let's say Quran, let's say, right? There are large number of words that are used for kafirs, the unbelievers. Kutta, Gadha, Najas, four-legged animals, right? Dangar. Now, why these kind of words are being thrown at kafirs? Because it is the process of dehumanization. So once you otherize a large section of people, you try to dehumanize them. Okay. So once you dehumanize, then the next step is clear, right? You kill them, right? Because once they are dehumanized and they are like, okay, they are unbelievers, it becomes a spiritual task to wipe out these large number of people out of existence, right? You just wipe them out because it is now your spiritual. It is your obligation. It is ordained by God to wipe them out because they are inferior and they are contaminating your blood, and then they are whatever colluding. I mean, these are theories that people have preached. This is not a new thing that you don't know, right?
Can you quote any specific text from the perhaps Quran that you mentioned, which
these words they have been used, right? The very word kafir and najas, dangar. These are used in this literature.
It's surprising that such words are used in something that's considered as a holy text, that's considered something to be followed.
Right. I mean, that's the point. I mean, that's what I'm saying, that there is a process of otherization in these sort of Abrahamic beliefs that had historically led to multiple genocides. Now, Hindu scripture don't have that sort of otherization processes. I mean, I know a lot of talks are going on about these casteism, Varna Vyavastha and all these things. But literally, if you go, let's take Manusmriti, right? I don't know, in modern days, the most controversial literature that is there. You just go through the first 20-30 slokas. What is there? It is basically the cosmology of mind, how mind got created. You go so there are different parts, different segments. You go, then there are duties of the Brahmins, right? And there are punishment for it. And there are many restrictions that are given to Brahmins, right? Then there are episodes like, okay, what are how to rule a kingdom, how to do this and that, right? Now, there is no process of otherization there. Every sect, they have every sort of strata of society, they have their own set of duties, and they are bound to obey that. They are bound to do that. That's their karma that they are bound to do, right? Perform. There is no process of otherization. It's not like इसको उसके साथ लड़ा दो, ये उसको मारेगा, गॉड ने कहा है कि ये उसको पीट देगा तो उसको स्वर्ग मिल जाएगा. You let's say take example of Gita, right? In Bhagavad Gita, specifically in Bhagavad Gita, for example, there is, I think in second chapter, for example, so in first chapter Arjuna is saying, I don't want to fight, these are my own people, how can I fight with them and all these things. In the second chapter Krishna is saying, no, you are a yodha, this is your duty right now. If you don't perform your duty, तुम्हारा नाम खराब होगा.
Can that be not equated to what Quran was trying to do?
No, now I am going to cite you the sloka. The sloka that says, and it will sound very much like Quran, for example. Probably at some part Quran has gotten it from this sort of ideology, I mean philosophies. But let me quote the exact sloka. So it says, Jitvova prapsasi swargam, hatvova prapsasi mahim. No, hatvova prapsasi swargam, jitvova bhokshase mahim, tasmat uttishta sanjaya. Yuddhat krita nishchaya. Yuddhaya krita nishchaya. Now, what does it mean? It means कि if you die, you will go to heaven. You will be worshipped by the devtas. If you win this war, you will basically rule over the entire world, right? So just get up and fight, right? Like make determination to fight. Be determined to fight. So here there is a sense of karma in here, that right now this is your karma, you have to do it, and no matter you win or you lose, you will be awarded for your karma, right? Because this is your great karma. Right now you are in front of the greatest battle, right? But you compare it with let's say Abrahamic doctrines. Abrahamic doctrines are saying, okay, these are inferior people, you have to wipe them out because your God is telling that. Right? There is an external agent with whom you are having a contract. No, this is a third party agent who is sitting in remote heaven, right? And because you are told that that guy in remote heaven has said that, you have to dehumanize this other section who have been coexisting with you, and you have to kill them because it is a spiritual duty ordained by that God, and that God hate that others. That's why you need to wipe them out. Right? I mean, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is not saying, I am hating Bhishma, I am hating Drona.
Instead, he respects them a lot. Yeah.
He respects them, right? He is taking the whole chariot in front of them, right? So that Arjuna can bow. But he is saying, Arjuna, no, this is your duty, that's why you need to do it. And that's why the Hindu scripture don't have this process of otherization. We don't see it. In fact, let's consider the Abrahamic God with, let's say, the Hindu sense of Brahma, right? Now, Abrahamism believe in not only in one God, but they believe in one and only God. And that's why the problem comes. That my God is the only God. And there is no other God except that. And that's why the problem comes. Because if I don't obey to that God, that let's say Abrahamics are obeying, then I am at danger. I am in danger. Then I am being like, I have to face the wrath of their God. And that wrath will come through the other agent who are living in this planet. So that is the process of otherization, which is very dangerous. And in history, it has led to countless genocides in all continents except Antarctica. I mean, they have not killed penguins yet with this ideology. But in coming days, probably there will be another Abrahamic ideology where God will tell that these penguins are the inferior creature, kill them, right? So, I mean, it has happened to a large part of our ecosystem. I mean, the overall, a large number of species, for example, right? If you don't know, we can discuss it, what happened in North America during this whole expansion of the white people. But that's the point. I mean, it has led to genocides in every continent. In the last 2000 years, and that's this process of otherization is the first step towards perpetrating genocide. So the second reason was that the global power, right? For example, United States, specifically when the 1971 Hindu genocide was going on in Bangladesh, for example, Then US was with the genocideers, the Pakistani army basically, right? And it is we find it from various actually Henry Kissinger, and then there was Nixon was the president, and there were multiple accounts where Kissinger is saying, for example, quote. Here is Nixon, who is saying in June 1971, when the genocide is going on, quote, undoubtedly the most unattractive woman in the world are the Indian women, undoubtedly. And then he continued, the most sexless, nothing these people. I mean, people say, what about the black Africans? Well, you can see something, the vitality there. I mean, they have a little animal-like charm. But God, these Indians, pathetic. Ooh. So this is Nixon, the president of United States. He's writing this. Kissinger is writing, for example, right? Kissinger is writing the Indians are super flatterers. They are masters at flattery. They are masters at subtle flattery. That's how they survived 600 years. They suck up. Their great skill is to suck up to people in key positions. So these are the beliefs of United States and their key persons, right, about Hindus and Indians, specifically Hindus in Bangladesh, for example. All while Pakistani army is clearly claiming that, hey, Hindu women are slutty, hence we cannot allow Hindus to sort of procreate in Bangladesh. हमें इनका नस्ल बदलना है. और ऊपर से बंगालीज आर ब्लैक, दे आर अगली, तो हमारा जो पंजाबी जिन है वो इनके नस्ल में डालना है ताकि मतलब ठीक ठाक पाकिस्तानी पैदा हो सके बांग्लादेश में. So all these genocidal words that are being uttered by the Pakistani army is getting support from United States, right? This is the second reason. The third reason is the extermination camp in Bangladesh, right? For example, they used to be by the rivers. So Bangladesh, Bengal has a lot of rivers, right? And in fact, this was the reason why Jawaharlal Nehru, by the way, he used to say that Bengal is not India. This is also written in my book. This is quoted by Ram Manohar Lohia in his book, The Guilty Men of India's Partition, where Lohia is saying, hey, Nehru, after or during the time of Noakhali, Nehru approached me and says that Bengal is the land of slums and bushes and rivers, hence, and muds. Hence, this is not the India that he knew. So with some vehemence, Nehru wanted to sort of basically make Bangladesh a separate country than India, right? He wanted to partition Bangladesh or Bengal completely. So all these things, right? And so Bengal was a land of rivers. I mean, still is a land of rivers. So all these extermination camps, they used to be by the side of the rivers so that they can dispose the bodies, right, in the rivers. That's why people didn't know much of it. In spite of that, I must say, the United States press was very vocal about it. So here is Joseph Fried, a war journalist from New York Daily News, wrote in one of his reports published in 1971, a stream of victims and eyewitnesses tell how truckloads of Pakistani soldiers and their hireling Razakars swooped down on villages in the night, rounding up women by force. Some were raped on the spot. Others were carried to military compounds. Some women were still there when Indian troops battled their way into Pakistani strongholds. Weeping survivors of villages raged because they were suspected of siding with the Mukti Bahini freedom fighters, told of how wives were raped before the eyes of their husbands, who were then put to death. Pakistani officers maintained that their men were too disciplined for that sort of things, right? Then we have multiple accounts that are coming from the press, actually, from United States itself. And there is a report that was made by Pakistan, actually, which was later actually, I think, revoked or something. But there were various medical officers from multiple countries who joined after this whole rape genocide of Bengali women. And they found that at least as registered, there were 3 lakh This number is the number of women who got genocided, right? Who got raped during 1971. 30 lakhs lost their life. 1 crore were basically displaced. Now these numbers, if you compare it with, let's say, Holocaust, right? These numbers are way too large, right? And the brutality that Hindu women faced actually in Bangladesh in 1971, or from, I would say, 1947 to 1971, in multiple occasions, are actually way more brutal than the Holocaust itself. And even before this Bangladesh genocide, the 1,000 years of Hindu genocides, multiple times, right? For example, in Bin Qasim, I must say one thing. So, yeah. So for the United North India, let's say, United Aryabharta, उत्तर भारत, उसका जो पहला मस्जिद था, do you know वो कैसे बना था?
You mentioned it in the book, yeah, with bones.
It was made of Hindu bones. हिंदुओं के हड्डी से उत्तर भारत का पहला मस्जिद बना था. सिंध के देवल में जब मोहम्मद बिन कासिम जब इन्वेड किया था 712 to 714 AD, उन्होंने देवल में, सिंध के देवल में बनभोर नाम का जगह है, वहाँ पे जो मस्जिद बनाया था, उसे प्लास्टर किया था. वो हिंदुओं को मारा था, उनके बोन को क्रश करके उससे प्लास्टर किया था. सो नाउ ये अगर जेनोसाइड नहीं है तो फिर क्या है, राइट? आई मीन, सो दिस इज 712 714, द वेरी फर्स्ट इस्लामिक इन्वेजन ऑन इंडिया. उसके बाद तो हिंदू रेजिस्टेंस काफ़ी हद तक था, वो दैट इज़ अनदर टॉपिक. बट फिर जब महमूद गजनबी आया, मैंने कैलकुलेट किया है, वॉक्स का एक डेटा मुझे मिला था पॉपुलेशन का, तो मैंने ऑब्वियसली एक लीनियर रिग्रेशन लगा के मैंने पाया है कि जो महमूद गजनबी के टाइम 4 लाख लोग आयदन मारे गए थे या इंडिया से डिस्प्लेस्ड हुए थे. मोहम्मद घुरी के टाइम 8 लाख लोग हिंदुस्तान से टिल 1192 में जो तराइन का बैटल हुआ था, उससे 8 साल पहले का बात कर रहा हूँ, 1184 तक 8 लाख हिंदू या तो मारे गए थे या डिस्प्लेस हुए थे. ठीक है. फिर तैमूर का टाइम ले लो. तैमूर का टाइम आई थिंक 2 से 3 लाख लोग मारे गए थे और 5 से 7 लाख लोग स्लेव बनाए गए थे. इनफैक्ट महमूद गजनवी के टाइम इतने लोगों को स्लेव टेकिंग में लेके जाया गया था और अलग अलग मार्केट में बेचा गया था, मिडिल ईस्ट और फिर सेंट्रल एशिया के, कि वहाँ पे स्लेव रखना घर में इट यूज्ड टू बी ए वेरी एक्सपेंसिव थिंग. लेकिन स्लेव मार्केट में स्लेव का प्राइस कम हो गया कि उनका सप्लाई इतना बढ़ गया. सो एक कॉमन जो मिडिल क्लास फैमिली था उनका, वो एक हिंदू स्लेव पाल सकते थे, इतना प्राइस गिरा स्लेव का. ठीक है. आई कैन गो ऑन एंड ऑन. आई मीन, एट द टाइम ऑफ अकबर फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अकबर 1564 या 68 का जो चित्तौड़गढ़ का जो मैसेकर था, उसमें इतने ब्राह्मणों को जिन्होंने ये जंग में हिस्सा भी नहीं लिए थे, चित्तौड़गढ़ का जब सीज़ किया गया था, इतने ब्राह्मणों को मारे थे. उनका जो जनेऊ है उसको कलेक्ट करके फिर तोले थे, वे किए थे, तो उसका वेट आता 74.5 मन. तो उसको कैलकुलेट करो तो मतलब 30 से 40 हज़ार ब्राह्मणों का हत्या किया गया था जो जंग में शायद हिस्सा नहीं लिए थे. फार्मर का इक्वली उतना नंबर है, फार्मरों को भी अकबर ने मारा था जो जंग में हिस्सा नहीं लिए थे. 30,000 एटलीस्ट फार्मर का इंतकाल हुआ था. एंड आई कैन गो ऑन एंड ऑन एक्चुअली कि उसके बाद जो आया आपका देखो औरंगज़ेब, राइट, 46 lakhs. दिस इज़ द नंबर बीइंग कोटेड बाय न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स. दुनिया के सबसे बड़े बड़े जो जेनोसाइड हुआ है और जेनोसाइडियर है, उसमें औरंगज़ेब का नाम है. न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स ने साइट किया है. 46 lakhs हिंदू मारा था बंदा. औरंगज़ेब डिस्ट्रॉयड प्रीटी मच ऑल द बिग हिंदू टेम्पल्स इन इंडिया, ऑल द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट हिंदू टेम्पल, ये छोड़ा ही नहीं. जब शाहजहां के टाइम में ही वो गुजरात का वो गवर्नर था, गुजरात में फिर उन्होंने टेम्पल बनाना, ये सब पूजा वूजा बंद कर दिया था. वो जब फिर बादशाह बने, फिर तो बनारस में हिंदू जो एजुकेशन चलता था उसको बंद कर दिया, टेम्पल गिरा दिए एक के बाद एक इंपॉर्टेंट टेम्पल. आप एक नाम ले लो, जो कोई भी एक ज्योतिर्लिंग का नाम ले लो, वो उसने गिराया था. ठीक है. तो 46 लाख हिंदुओं को मारा था. फिर आप सोचो, दिस इज़ द स्केल दैट वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट. 46 lakh in before 1707. आप जब ये नंबर होलोकॉस्ट बोलते हो 60 लाख इन 1940s, उस ज़माने में 200-300 साल पहले 50 लाख के करीब लोग मारना, कितना, अगर ये जेनोसाइड नहीं है, ये सबसे इनफैक्ट ये अपना एक कोट है, आई थिंक ये मैंने लिखा भी है पहले इधर ही, विल डुरांट जो थे, एक बहुत फेमस हिस्टोरियन फिलोसोफर थे, वो लिखते हैं द मोहम्मदन कॉन्क्वेस्ट ऑफ इंडिया इज़ प्रोबेबली द bloodiest story in history. It is a discouraging tale, for its evident moral that civilization is a precarious thing, whose delicate, complex order and liberty, culture and peace may at any time be overthrown by barbarians. कि तुम शांति से जी रहे हो, आराम से जी रहे हो, एडवांस्ड एक सिविलाइजेशन हो, कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता. इंडिया का जो मोहम्मदन कॉन्क्वेस्ट है, इट इज़ प्रोबेबली द ब्लडीएस्ट हिस्ट्री, जो हमें सिखाता है कि कल्चर, पीस, ऑर्डर, लिबर्टी, भाईचारा, ये सब मैटर ही नहीं करता. इट कैन एनी टाइम बी ओवरथ्रोन बाय बारबेरियंस. तो ये जो सबसे ब्रूटल जो जेनोसाइड हुआ है दुनिया के हिस्ट्री में, इसे एक्नॉलेज करना पड़ेगा. इफ़ यू डोंट एक्नॉलेज इट, यू कैन नेवर डिकोलोनाइज दिस कंट्री, राइट. सो उसी बात पे मैं आ रहा हूँ कि बाहर का जो प्रेस हो गया, आपका जो ओवरआर्चिंग जो नैरेटिव चलता है, दोज आर अब्राहमिक नैरेटिव्स विच आर अगेंस्ट द पेगन्स. सो ये अलग अलग वजह से कितना भी आप हिंदुओं को मान लो, वो चर्चा पे आता नहीं है. उसके लिए रियली आपको देखना पड़ेगा कि एक्चुअली हिस्टोरिकली 1000 years में हुआ क्या है.
I wonder why these weren't covered in our NCERT textbooks. जो जलियनवाला बाग मैसाकर के बारे में बात करते हैं, जो who tell about Akbar being a secular person, but if such high numbers back facts, why wasn't it covered in our NCERT textbooks?
See, पहला पॉइंट ये है कि एक बुक में, एक NCERT जो मान लीजिए हाई स्कूल लेवल के बुक में जो सब कुछ तो कवर होता नहीं है. दूसरा पॉइंट ये है कि वो जो कवर्ड हो रहा है वो सच होगा, इसकी कोई गारंटी नहीं है. और ये मैं कैसे कह रहा हूँ, राइट. नाउ आई हैव डेटा पॉइंट्स. सो मैं ये कवर कर रहा हूँ. फॉर एग्जांपल आई एम टेकिंग, मैं जैसे बंगाल से हूँ, तो वेस्ट बंगाल स्टेट बोर्ड का एक सर्कुलर आया था उनके बोर्ड ऑफ एजुकेशन को, जो मैं पढ़ के सुनाना चाहता हूँ. सरकार ने दिया था ये. सो यू कैन नॉट टेल मी कि किसी और ने लिखा है या फिर आई एम कॉन्कॉक्टिंग और मेकिंग अप एनीथिंग. सो टू प्रूव दिस पॉइंट दैट there are circulars that are being propagated by the governments, right, to whitewash or ignore or concoct the history of Hindu genocides. Here is a point that I am talking, page 438 from my book. So to prove all the points discussed here, let us consider an example to ensure that the history being taught is objective. Now, the West Bengal Board of Secondary Education, WBBSE, issued an instruction on 24th of April 1989 that, quote, Muslim rule should never attract any criticism. Destruction of temples by Muslim rulers and invaders should not be mentioned, unquote. After careful scrutiny of a number of history textbooks, the West Bengal Board of Secondary Education suggested corrections from ashuddho. Ashuddho means impure or incorrect, to shuddho, correct. Some of the corrections are provided below. So ashuddho. Now there is a textbook by Sukhamoy Das, Bharat Katha, published by Bardhaman Education Society. Page 140 had this line: in Sindhu days the Arabs did not describe Hindus as kafir. They banned cow slaughter. They had cow slaughter. Now, the West Bengal board is instructing, delete, quote, they had banned cow slaughter. Okay. Page 141. Using force to destroy Hindu temples. So now this is Ashuddho. Using force to destroy Hindu temples was also an expression of aggression. Fifthly, forcibly marrying Hindu women and converting them to Islam before marriage was another way to propagate the fundamentalism of the ulema. board instruction, delete, with no further reference, by the way. Dr. Narendranath Bhattacharya, ভারতবর্ষের ইতিহাস, দ্য হিস্ট্রি অফ ইন্ডিয়া, চক্রবর্তী অ্যান্ড সন্স, পেজ 89. Sultan Mahmud used force for widespread murder, loot, destruction, and conversion. I mean, we know it's written by Aludbi, right? Instruction given by a board, Shuddho, the Shuddho form. Quote, there was widespread loot and destruction by Mahmud. Delete reference of killing or forceful conversions. Page 89. He looted valuables worth 2 crore dirham from Somnath temple and used the shivling as a step leading up to the masjid in Ghazni. Board's instruction. You want to guess? Delete, quote, and use the shivling as a step leading up to the masjid in Ghazni, which is written by the historian of Ghazni himself, right? Page 112. The non-believers had to embrace Islam or death. Board's instruction, Shuddho, delete it. Page 113. According to Islamic law, non-Muslims will have to choose between death and Islam. Only the Hanafis allow non-Muslims to pay jizya in exchange for their lives. Board's instruction, Shuddho, rewrite as follows, quote, by paying jizya to Alauddin Khilji, Hindus could lead normal lives. Which is again false, by the way, as written in my book in extensive detail. Now the next book, Shubhankar Chattopadhyay, Bharater Itihas, Narmada Publishers. Page 181. To prevent Hindu women from being seen by Muslims, they were directed to remain indoors. Board's instruction, delete. Nolini Bhushan Dasgupta, Itihasher Kahini, B.B. Kumar Publishers. Page 132. According to James Todd, the purpose behind Alauddin's Chittor expedition was to secure Rana Ratnan Singh's beautiful wife, Padmini. Board's instruction, delete it.
But why? Why? You mentioned a lot of places they asked to delete it.
I can go on, but I am referencing from another book, and the proper references are given in my book, right? You are asking why they are asking to delete it?
Yeah.
Now, well, here I have to obviously give a conjecture that, okay, to show Islam in good light or Islamic invasion in good light.
And what incentive do they have to do that?
So what incentive? So now I have to tell you a history. So the first 5 education minister of India were actually Ashrafs. Okay. So the motivation might have come from there. I mean, we know that they sideline great historians like R.C. Majumdar, for example, right? And to whitewash the crime. And it's not a new template, you have to understand it. Christianity in Europe, in Rome, has done it for the last 2000 years. They have committed a genocidal crime and then through literature they have whitewashed it.
True, but in those countries or in those nations, they were the majority, so they have the liberty to do that. In India, where we were the majority, why was it a requirement to remove certain facts against the majority community by the education?
So let's say around 400 AD, you mean, or 318 AD, let's say, the time of Constantine the Great. Were pagans the majority or Christians the majority? Who were whitewashing all these crimes? You see the point, right? If you have a motivation, if you want to create motivated literature, you can always create it. And in fact, if you dig deeper into this one, I would say that, see, these ideologies, right, they believe in historiocentric morals. Historiocentric morals is like, okay, that says, okay, there is certain history that happened at certain point, let's say around 0 to 40 AD or 570 to 630 AD in Rome or in Jerusalem or in Middle East, right? And that history before that event was the age of darkness. And after that event, let's say arrival of a prophet. After the arrival of prophet, there is this age of illumination. Now, the problem with these kind of historiocentric morals are that they are not natural morals. You see, the historiocentric morals, they have a birth and a death. So they cannot claim they cannot claim morality, so to say. They cannot claim the moral structure that is there in our society or in the nature or in the universe. That's the problem. These Abrahamic ideologies they promote historiocentric morals. Hence, they need to concoct facts, okay, in order to create new kind of morals. These are synthetic morals. These are artificial morals. They are not natural morals, right? So yeah, just to just to sort of reduce the anomalies that are being perpetually created through their concoction of facts, church or other institutions, they get, or let's say some other educational institutions, so to say, they get invested to concoct moral and the historiocentricity and historiocentric facts, history itself. It's not a very old thing, so to say.
You mentioned about the US incentive in Pakistan, to cover certain facts. Why would the US be incentivized to side with Pakistan, to not consider the genocides that were happening and to cover them up? And what does it mean by being Soros funded, that is usually used against people, who talk about liberal ideas?
Right. So, see, the Soros funded thing I don't want to touch because this is not in the thesis of this book. Probably we will discuss it, not before the screen. But I have my own opinion. But this is not the thesis. So, I am not going to touch upon that topic. The other point you were talking about, why US is siding with Pakistan, right? I mean, isn't it anomalous that a democratic country is siding with a whatever autocratic military-run state, right? One theory is that, okay, maybe because India is Hindu majority, they see this country as a pagan land. That's why they think, okay, Islam, it is a progressive force, just like US. Hence, they need to side with the Pakistanis, the progressive part in this subcontinent, to stand against this really tribal, primeval culture of Hindus in India.
But how can they stand side by side when we see in Germany and in NYC where the jihadis are like, oh, this land is going to be, ruled by Islam? Why would a country that is a Christian majority want to side with something that perhaps is a competitive force?
No, but the problem is that if you think the whole design as Abrahamism, then who are outside that design of Abrahamism? Mostly the Oriental culture, Hindus, Chinese, for example, right? Japan, right? But you have to understand, Japan and China, their culture are already occupied by the Western, historiocentric, progressive forces, quote unquote progressive forces. India is still an open land, which behoves to be conquered. That's why the whole battle is being played that way.
You touched about the Varna system, but and I also heard about Sankrant Sanu mentioning the Varna system and the caste-based discrimination is all because it is viewed from a colonial lens. But I'm not particularly convinced. So do we also say that Karna, who was himself a victim of the same, called as Sudputra, was discriminated like that because of the colonial gaze of the caste system?
No, see, the point is, the story of Karna is completely different thing. I mean, are you trying to... Okay, so this is different than the topic of genocide, by the way.
It is.
But that's another topic. I think you can... I heard one podcast from Ami Ganatra. She told that, okay, Karna, if you consider, okay, he was quote unquote lower caste, right? That's why he was rejected, right? That's not true. Because apparently he was son of Sarthi, and Sarthis used to be considered as quote unquote higher caste. I don't believe in these kind of caste or in these things. But it's not just true that, okay, he was being rejected for being a lower caste or whatever, right? I don't have much knowledge on this, primarily because when writing this book, it's basically the nazar, the view that you are getting is like, okay, Hindus are being killed for being Hindus. It's not like Brahmins are being spared or Shudras are making alliances on. In fact, there is an instance in modern India, Jogendranath Mandal, that I mentioned. So Jogendranath Mandal was a guy from Bengal, Namasudra community, who made this Tafsili party. Tafsili party used to believe that the economic condition and the social condition of the quote-unquote lower caste people are highly correlated, just like Indian Muslims. Hence, the Indian Muslims should make a natural alliance with the Namasudra community. So they supported Muslim League. Muslim League went on to win the election in Bengal. Bengal got partitioned. Jogendranath Mandal got a ministry, I guess, in law and Kashmir affairs, something like that. But in 1950, I think in March, 8th of March, if I remember it correctly, he had to resign because the Namasudra community, the so-called lower caste community, was the primary target of the Muslim League after the partition. So it's not like when the genocide was happening or when the genocide has been happening, let's say, it is targeting one caste and sparing another. No, all castes are being equally targeted. So from the perspective of the thesis of the book, I don't see any difference where, let's say, so-called this upper caste or lower caste are being spared and another caste is being targeted.
I want to touch about Akbar because we, including the audience, are taught about Jodha Akbar. We are taught about how Akbar was a secular Mughal.
Right.
But I think you've mentioned about how Akbar used to go to Meena Bazaar in disguise, looking out for people that he can add to his harem. And what exactly was harem? Structurally, politically, sexually?
Okay, and another topic, controversial topic. I mean, Akbar used to have harem. Everyone knows this, right? I mean, but what I want to discuss in the context of genocide is that the infamous Chittorgarh massacre, right? So in 1564 or 1568, so they seized Chittorgarh, and before, during, and after the siege, they were killing innocent people, right? Like farmers, for example. Now, the Hindu template of warfare is different than what was going on or what has been going on in this land against Hindus. So what is Hindu template of warfare? So we believe in three forms of conquests. One is Sura Vijay or Deva Vijay, where, let's say, the defeated king's life will be spared and everything will be spared. The defeated king will just accept the sovereignty of the victorious king, right? Then there was Lobha Vijay, where the victorious king will take the wealth and everything from the king but spare his life, the life of the defeated king. The Asura Vijay, where the victorious king will kill the defeated king as well. Now, Asura Vijay used to be regarded as the most brutal form of conquest. Hence, it used to be looked down upon. Now, since the 7th century, when this Islamic invasion is happening, in 9th century, there is a guy, Kashmiri Pandit, Kashmiri scholar, Ballavadev, who is writing that whatever is going on due to this Turkey and the Mlechas, it is so despicable that the template of this warfare and Asura Vijay cannot merely describe it. We need a new template to describe this sort of heinous brutality of what is going on here by the Turkeys and Mlechas. But what he suggested was based on his observation of out and out damage of the warfare during the invasion and genocide, right? He did not consider the underlying template or the doctrine that was running these form of quote unquote warfare, or in modern day we know this was genocide. So obviously we believe in different kind of warfare where if farmer is farming, the war has nothing to do with the farmer. But Akbar was violating that. He killed around 20,000-30,000 farmers. Now he killed Brahmins also. And so after killing the Brahmins, he took the Janayus out and weighed it. And it used to weigh like 74.5 mon. If you calculate it from there, law of averaging, it will come out to be 30,000 to 40,000 Brahmins, along with the 20 to 30,000 farmers, right? Now, this brutality, right? Other than that, there are various accounts where Akbar is posing as like the Ghazi who is going to kill the Kafirs in Allahabad. We get some account, but particularly the Chittorgarh massacre. It was so brutal that the whole conscience of our country was actually perturbed by it. Let me tell you one incident actually on this. So in Bengali there is a 74 and a half, right? The Bengali for this is Sade Chuattur. Now Sade Chuattur, there was a movie about it. The movie is named Sade Chuattur, about the partition genocide. Why this specific name Sade Chuattur? Why this number is important? So in Bengal, people used to write letters to each other. Okay, and if the person who is writing the letter, he did not intend that the carrier, right, the person who is carrying the letter is obliged not to read it, then he or she would write 74 and a half, Sade Chuattur, on the envelope of the letter. And if the carrier, he or she reads it, the whole sin of that Chittorgarh massacre would be on the head of that person who just unlawfully opened the letter, right? So this is the conscience that I'm talking about. Like Chittorgarh massacre, everyone sort of across the land, across the subcontinent, they knew what kind of person Akbar was and what he did to Chittorgarh. And you should know that Chittorgarh is like, this fort is a fort of pride for the Hindus, right? For the Rajputs and Hindus overall. But what Akbar did to this was beyond despicable.
As we talk about Muslim rulers, what are your views on Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore, the freedom fighter, the secular icon? There must be a reason why people celebrate him across generations, right? Then what is it to do with Iyengars not celebrating Deepavali, and is that also to do with genocide?
Exactly. I mean, you see, Iyengar Brahmins, they had nothing to do with Tipu Sultan apparently, running his own administration, right? But in the eyes of Tipu Sultan, they were bound to be killed and slaughtered because they were Brahmins and they came in the way of conversion of a large area in Malabar, for example, right? So this guy Tipu, he went to these places. He used to destroy temples, and I think there was his Vijaya, or I think Deepavali. During that Deepavali, he killed a large number of Iyengar Brahmins actually, just for being Brahmins, right? So again, if you don't call it genocide, what it is?
You also document about pregnant women, and what are you citing? Where is it mentioned, about the structured killing, about the way they need to proceed? You have mentioned about pregnant women being, I can't speak it out, but being raped and in such a way that the fetus is visible. Where is all of this written?
Written, you're asking if this is written in scripture or anything?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me tell you one fact, that these are written in some Middle East literature. So let's stop there. Okay. I don't want to create unnecessary controversy, but it's there. You can find it. But yes, if see, that's the point, that if a genocide is being perpetrated, most likely it is written somewhere. Okay, if there is a method in which, let's say, a large number of people are getting killed, it is written somewhere. And these methods of killings, they are also mentioned in exactly the same way. How they should be killed, right? Who should be killed? What are the historical instances that these people the genocidaires should follow? Everything, mostly for the genocides, these methods, they come from some literature because they need some amount of imagination, right? And they are actually there in some old scriptures, let's put it that way.
In the Quran, it is written, kill the kafirs, and that's how you'll get Jannat. First question is, how is the concept of Jannat and Jahannam different from the ones that we have in other cultures about heaven and hell?
So, Jannat Jahannam is basically, so mostly in Abrahamism, right? What happens is, like, you have a third party who is this remote god, right? In Christianism, there is this old god who is sitting in some remote heaven, like he's watching every move, right? Um, and and then in Abrahamism there are like different layers of heaven, which is so mostly in pretty much in all Abrahamic ideologies the earth is flat. So it is flat, you have like straight up, right? You have earth is flat and it is static, so you have a constant direction which is up, right? And there are different layers of heaven, and when you do something as ordained by this god who is sitting in the remote heaven, you go to this place, these external places above earth, above the static flat earth, right? And if you don't obey that god and their scripture, you just go to the hell, and eternally you are burnt and whatever, you're skinned and all these things, right? You are made tandoor, right? But Swarga and Narak, for example, right? In Indian literature, for example, the Vedantic literature, for example, it's like the Brahma that we are hypothesizing, and it is not merely hypothesis, it is, as per the scripture, it is pratyaksha. It's like you can experience it, right? And when that happens, you attain a state which is Advaita, which is अव्यक्त, right? नैर्व्यक्तिक बोलते हैं इसे बंगाली में. So it's a state where you don't have the duality of happiness or sorrow and all these things, right? You don't have any duality, you attain a non-dual state, and that is the Brahma Gyan, right? So that is like the going to the Swarga. And in contrast, if you don't realize it, in fact you just give way to the six enemies, Sada Ripus, like Kam, Krodh, Mad, Lobh, Moh, Matsarya. You never attain this eternal sort of delight. It's not even happiness, this delight. And that is the Narak within you. So no matter whether it is Swarga or Narak, it is happening within you. It is not happening outside, right? There is no God who is sitting in some remote heaven who is dictating you. There is no third party making a contract with you. There is no barter and trade. It is coming from you, your realization, your pratyaksha, right? That's the basic difference, I would say.
Do you believe that over time certain scriptures can become perhaps outdated and their meaning can be twisted?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we consider Quran telling kill the kafirs as something similar? That Quran is perhaps a military text, and perhaps now killing the kafirs doesn't make sense. It was during the military times.
No. Because in Islamic literature, it is actually written that Quran is valid till Roze Qayamat, which is the last day of judgment. So if the scripture which is coming from, let's say, above, sent by their God, who is saying that this is valid till this point, who are you to deny that?
Fair point. Okay. And I want to ask about what is al-taqiyya, perhaps, if you could.
Al-taqiyya is deception, right? Al-taqiyya, al-makar, it's different kind of deception that are being played in favor of Islam, right? So if you lie in favor of Islam, it is al-taqiyya. It's as simple as that.
Got it. And perhaps how does this, build as a foundation for conversion or jihad? And is this some kind of a perhaps soft genocide that happens in the background, perhaps even in the current day, that we aren't aware about?
So al-taqiyya, one example would be, you just whitewash the history in favor of Islam. It is an act of al-taqiyya in the eyes of, let's say, an Islamic believer, in the eyes of an ashraf, let's say. It's as simple as that. Whatever you do, right? If you do a deception which is in favor of Islam, it is al-taqiyya.
Okay. And another question I had is, so I use the help of Gemini right now in front of you. And in my understanding, genocide is a part of war. It has happened, during the Crusades, the Christian colonialism, where they killed millions. Even we have Pushyamitra Shunga, who is from the Shunga dynasty, overthrowing the Mauryan Empire. And he is one of the most debated figures, but he is also known to, offer a reward of 100 dinaras for the head of every Buddhist monk in Shakala. At the same time, we have the accounts of the persecution of Jains in Madurai. We have the accounts of, impaling in Jains, where there was a mass execution after a religious debate. So, why do we concentrate on the Hindu genocides when genocide is a part of war and a part of every culture? A lot of Hindu kings have done it too.
Now, so a large number of these historical facts, they are debated. But let's accept right now that they are true. Okay? The point is, which part of Hindu scriptures say that Jains are kafirs, they should be killed? I mean, it needs to, if you are calling that, okay, I am calling that, okay, Abrahamism is leading to genocide because it believes in a process of us and them otherization. Where in Hindu literature, Hindus have written ki let's kill everyone who don't believe in Hindu God. Who, let's say, I mean, isn't it bizarre? I'm giving you, just imagine ki you go to Europe and you just kill a bunch of people in Paris and burn Louvre, and you burn all libraries in Paris, saying that these people don't believe in Ma Saraswati, hence we have to burn their library. Does it make sense? Right? It sounds absurd, right? Because you're wired that way, right? You don't have that sense of otherization. This is otherization imposed by the God himself, right? And it's himself, by the way, right? It's a man God who looked down upon women, right? There are multiple verses on this itself. So this is an absurd, I mean, whatever is going on, if there is a war going on, where people are being killed, they are not necessarily genocide. Genocide is like when you are killing genos, not fighters, right? When you're killing innocent people, that's when it is genocide. For some reason, for some spiritual reason, let's say, that's genocide. In fact, the United Nations Convention, right, against genocide prevention, it has framed genocide. It has given a definition of genocide, which you can read from my book actually, and it mentions a motivation. It has a mental element and a physical element, and mental element is as important as the physical element. What is the mental element? Mental element is the intent to kill a large community of people for their identity. Now that's genocide. Hindus, if they were fighting war, there were a lot of bloodshed. Not necessarily they were killing because of the identity of those people, right? Because they believe in some other scripture, for example. It didn't happen that way. So those were not genocides, strictly saying.
I have a question that might be a little more personal, but is directed to you as an author. You mentioned in the part of destruction of Mathura and the Krishna Janmasthan temple, where in Kitab-i-Yamini it was described as, in the midst of city, they had built a temple higher than all to delineate the beauty and decoration. A huge and magnificent temple, which the people believed wasn't built by men, but by the angels. And in that you have written, the same book describes how Mahmud himself was completely wonderstruck. And he mentioned, and among the mass of idols, there were 5 idols made of pure gold, and the height of 5 cubits in the air. And the collection of idols were specifically 2 of them, one of which, a jacinth, was arranged, and upon the other idol there was a sapphire of 1 solid piece. And Muhammad burned the temple down with naphtha and fire in 1017 or 1018 AD. The city was plundered thereafter for 20 days. A huge number of gold and silver idols were plundered and carried away. And how, as he was even traveling to the temple in all of the cities, he had considered a lot of atrocities. You as an author reading all of these things, what was in your mind? What did you go through when reading and perhaps documenting all of these facts?
I mean, this book took 1.5 to 2 years to complete. And so when I started this work, right, I saw it as a thesis, as I told you already. Okay, there is a gap in this whole standard canonical historical narrative, and maybe I should put out this thesis before everyone to assess. So because I'm from physics background, when I'm doing let's say physics calculation, obviously there are failures, right? Because I'm a theoretical physicist and this is my lab, right? But the basic problem that what I did not understand before starting this work was that this was not like a physics thesis. In physics thesis, if two particles are colliding, right, you are simulating this in your mind through equations, through lattice simulation in our case. It's not like those particles colliding with each other is affecting you or your psyche. Yes, there are failures in your calculation. You are not getting a certain minima that you are expected to get. But it's like a personal challenge. Okay, maybe I should tweak the calculation. Other than that, it is not affecting your psyche. This sort of book when you write, and I must put it out before everyone, because I hope everyone, I dream that a lot of other people will also come out and write this kind of work, But this sort of book actually can affect your psyche. Like when you are working on this for 1.5, 2 years, and then the editors are also coming saying the same thing, that I cannot just read this book, right? It took again 1.5 years to edit this book actually. Army officers came to me that I could not read it in one go, so I had to take 6 months, and they personally got my number and messaged me. Army officer is saying this is a hard book to read. I also can tell you one more occasion on which I went to so it was a Friday night. I went to a pub, right, to drink and have fun with friends. So we got a seat right before the door. Okay. So this was the door, and we got our seats here, right here. I was imagining, my God, like this pub, if someone comes here and ravage this place, everyone is going to die. And I was imagining the whole scene in a pub, which was so happening, and everyone was dancing there. Saturday night, everyone is like at their, ever high mental level, excited. But I was imagining these sort of things. So then I realized that, okay, this has taken a toll on me, right, on my mental health. So I had to take break on and off. I had to go to do something better than this, like painting with bright colors, right? So, and I also planned, okay, I will come up with the second volume of this book, but I have shelved it. I will take some time before again coming up with the second part of this book actually. There are some, this book exhaustively documents pretty much all the events of Hindu genocides, except for Hindumisia and Hindu genocides, because Misia is hatred, right? There are large occasions where British showed hatred for Hindus. Except two important things. So the Goa Inquisition, and the Hyderabad massacre, which I will put in the next edition of this book. Other than that, this book exhaustively covers the history of Hindu genocide and Hindumisia. Also, one more thing, which is that if you see in the last part of this book, I wrote a letter to all Hindus. And it was a letter which was addressed at myself as well, because I wanted that sort of closure on a high note, that okay, a lot of bad things have happened to you, but there are two roads before you. One road will lead to darkness, obviously. Another road will lead to eternal happiness and eternal light, and let's pursue that. So and that's the only part where probably I went a bit personal, like you can see me as an author and with all my identity, right? Okay, there is an author who is writing this book. Other than that, I have attempted to maintain a very dispassionate language throughout the book.
Two more questions, Bijeet. The first one is, don't you somewhere agree that every religion perhaps has a motive of spreading its ideologies, of getting more people under it, and thus every religion has its own equivalent of missionaries? For example, isn't Bajrang Dal, RSS, AIMIM, PFI, SIMI, the media treats all of them identically, right? What is the structural difference? And quoting that the INC, Indian National Congress, calls RSS or Bajrang Dal as a Hindu terrorist organization. So what are your views about that?
See, now in this section, we're trying to project this thesis of Hindu genocide onto political arena, political dimension, right? But now that you asked the question, I would be happy to answer it. I mean, no matter which party a person belongs to, if he or she wants to listen about this thesis, I would be happy to explain. Here, when you are talking about Hindu terror, right? Now tell me how many books have been written in, let's say, or how many scriptures have been ordained by Hindu gods that says ki you have to put terror in the heart of the enemy who doesn't obey me, right? In fact, I will give you one example, which is that I think there's this guy in Pakistani army, some Niazi. He wrote a book, The Quranic Concept of War, I guess. Now, in Quranic Concept of War, he is telling that this guy Niazi is saying terror is not merely a mean, but an end in itself. कि तुम अगर कोई काफिर के दिल में दहशत डाल दो तो दैट इज़ एन एंड इन इटसेल्फ, क्योंकि उसी से बाकी काम हो जाता है. बस इतना ज़रूरी है कि उसके दिल में टेरर डालो. Now you tell me which kind of Hindu literature or I don't know Bajrang Dal's literature or modern Indian literature, Hindu literature is talking in this sentence कि जो नॉन हिंदू है उसके दिल में दहशत डाल दो कि वो तुम्हारा सारी चीज़ें तुम जो बोलो वो एक्सेप्ट कर ले, राइट? ये तो मुझे आई हैव डन एग्जॉस्टिव लिटरेचर सर्वे बट मुझे ऐसा कोई मिला नहीं. इनफैक्ट आई कैन गिव यू one event from history. So, and everyone knows this, right? कि जब बुद्धिज़्म काफ़ी now we see Buddhism as a different religion. तब शायद religion वाला वो आइडिया हिंदूज़ के दिमाग में या इंडियन के दिमाग में नहीं था. सो बुद्धिज़्म काफ़ी हद तक फैल गया था, मतलब सारे लोग बुद्धिज़्म अपना रहे थे, राइट? उनके उस टाइम के हिसाब से, मतलब ना आदि शंकराचार्य का टाइम भी उसके लिए भी एक बुक लिख रहे हैं कि ये कब आए थे. बट जस्ट बिफोर हिम बुद्धिज़्म वाज स्प्रेडिंग, लाइक सेंट्रल एशिया, जापान, इधर उधर फैल रहा है, राइट? राजा महाराजा कन्वर्ट हो रहे हैं. देन केम आदि शंकराचार्य, राइट, हु थ्रू डिबेट्स बेसिकली लोगों को फिर हिंदुइज्म में, इफ़ इट इज़ अ डिफरेंट रिलीजन एट ऑल, वापस लाए. ऐसा नहीं कि आदि शंकराचार्य बोलने लगे कि बुद्धिस्ट आर काफिर्स, तलवार उठा लो, मार दो, राइट? हमारे हिस्ट्री में, इतिहास में, हिंदुओं के इतिहास में या सनातनियों के इतिहास में ये परंपरा नहीं है. ना ही ये बुद्धिस्ट परंपरा है, ना ही ये जैनिज़्म का परंपरा है और सिखिज़्म का परंपरा है. किसी का ये परंपरा नहीं है कि जो इनोसेंट है, जस्ट बिकॉज ही और शी और इट, अगर जानवर भी हो, बिलीव्स इन समथिंग, उसके फेथ या उसके बेसिस पे उसे मारा जा सकता है और वो स्पिरिचुअल टास्क होगा. ये सनातन परंपरा नहीं है और ये बार बार हम लोग देख चुके हैं. और इसीलिए ओके, यू कंपेयर इंडिया एंड यूरोप, वेस्टर्न यूरोप, राइट? सो अखंड भारत वाज द साइज ऑफ वेस्टर्न यूरोप एक्चुअली. ओके, नाउ इवन इफ यू कंपेयर द मॉडर्न पोस्ट पार्टीशन इंडिया एंड यूरोप, you see the amount of division in Europe, right? They are trying to come together, but कितने जंग लड़ चुके हैं वो लोग. इंडिया में ऐसा नहीं होता है कि हम लोग आपस में बैठ के जंग लड़ रहे हैं, राइट? यहाँ पे अगर 10 लोग बैठे हुए हैं, शायद 10 लोग 7 लैंग्वेज में बात कर सकते हैं, सबका लैंग्वेज डिफरेंट है, बट हमारा फिलोसफी एक है और वो हमें जाहिर नहीं करना पड़ता, राइट? हमें पता है कि these are the nuances, right? This should concept, मतलब construct a religious belief or faith at least, जिस पे हम लोग एग्री करते हैं, कन्वर्ज करते हैं. और उसमें कहीं ये युद्ध वुद्ध नहीं है. यहाँ पे अगर 7 लैंग्वेज है तो ये नहीं है कि ये बंदा उस लैंग्वेज में बात नहीं करता तो काफिर है, तो इसको मार सकते हैं, अनबिलीवर है, बिकॉज ही डजंट टॉक इन. दैट्स वाई इंडिया इज़ सो ब्यूटीफुल एंड सो डाइवर्स, कि हमने जो डाइवर्सिटी है उसको ख़त्म नहीं किया है. वी आर नॉट ट्राइंग टू क्रिएट अ होमोजीनियस uniform nation, right? We embrace the diversity because we know that we have one united philosophy, the philosophy of oneness, which is coming from something deeper than these earthly artificial diversity, right? तो उस हिसाब से मैं बोलूँगा कि सनातन का ये परंपरा नहीं है कि किसी को मार के कन्वर्ट कराना है. अगर कन्वर्ट कराना है, आई थिंक द थियोलॉजीज, इफ़ यू कैन कॉल इट थियोलॉजी एट ऑल, दे आर स्ट्रॉन्ग इनफ दैट वो आप ढंग से बताओ, थोड़ा पढ़ो, उसके बारे में लिखो, चर्चा करो. मोर राइटर्स शुड कम फॉरवर्ड एंड राइट अबाउट दीज थिंग्स. और काफ़ी लोग आ भी रहे हैं आगे, राइट. और उसी से कन्वर्ट करो. मुझे नहीं लगता तलवार उठाने की ज़रूरत है. शांतिपूर्वक ये सब किया जा सकता है.
बट सर, आपने जितने चीज़ों के लिए इन इन्वेडर्स पे ब्लेम डाला है, आई वुडंट बी सरप्राइज अगर आप अभी बोलो कि BC, MC, ऑल ऑफ दीज थिंग्स आर ऑल्सो origin from the Arabs or from the Turks who invaded us.
ओके, सो लेट मी टेल यू अ फ्यू वर्ड्स, राइट. जैसे बंदी, दिल्ली में, नॉर्थ इंडिया में स्पेसिफिकली ये बहुत चलता है कि मेरी बंदी है, मतलब मेरी गर्लफ्रेंड है. बंदी का मतलब क्या है? बंदी का मतलब सेक्स स्लेव है. बांदी, राइट, बांदी से आया है. बंदी लिटरली बंदी से आया है, राइट. बंदी हो गया. औरत, औरत का मतलब क्या है? सो फॉर वुमेन वी हैव अ वर्ड नारी, राइट, जो नरी से आ रहा है. दैट्स द ब्यूटी ऑफ इंडियन, मतलब ऑल लैंग्वेज, कि हमें उसका उद्भव कहाँ से हुआ वो पता है. प्रकृति, प्रत्यय, शब्द रूप, धातु रूप, ये पूरा स्ट्रक्चर है. एंड दैट्स द ब्यूटी कि आपको थोड़ा बहुत संस्कृत पता है ना, तो आप कोई भी आपका लैंग्वेज हो इंडिया में, मोस्ट ऑफ द लैंग्वेज है, उसका आपको सारे शब्दों का उत्पत्ति कहाँ से हुआ है वो पता चलेगा. लेकिन नारी को कॉन्ट्रास्ट करो औरत से. औरत का मतलब क्या है? औरत मीन्स द प्राइवेट पार्ट ऑफ ए वुमन इन अरबिक. ओके, so that tells you about the view of, let's say, a philosophy coming from Middle East against a philosophy in India.
Wow, I think that...
मैं इससे ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं कहूँगा. I can go on and on and on about this.
I think the rhetoric came back to bite me. Sir, so एक रैपिड फायर के साथ कंप्लीट करते हैं.
Sure.
केरला में law students are trained in Sharia law before sitting for CLAT. Is this documented? And what does this mean for the Indian legal system?
See, Indian legal system promised us that it would not otherize or dehumanize a section of Indian citizens. I am afraid if Shariat itself means law, by the way, ठीक है? If Shariat believes in that.
You mentioned Ghazwe Hind 2047. Is this a realistic geopolitical threat or fringe theological propaganda? And what do the numbers and doctrine actually say?
It appeared in the PFI's statement, right? That was recovered by Indian intelligence system. So, I think if it is being documented somewhere, it is being propagated somewhere. So, it exists in literature at least.
We are told the government controlling Hindu temples is wrong. Why so? Isn't it good that they're controlling to prevent corruption, to ensure smooth functioning of Hindu temples?
No, but you see, at least post-partition, the Indian state promised that it will keep. Okay, so how Indian secularism is interpreted is the way that Indian state will keep equal distance. I don't know what it means, but it will keep equal distance from all religions. Now, if Indian state don't have any command over mosque or gurudwara or churches, why would have command over Hindu temples? For gold, for money? I am not sure.
In Hinduism, I can walk into any ashram, question any text, debate any sage openly. Can I do the equivalent in Islam? Publicly question the Quran in a Muslim majority country? What would happen?
So in Islam, bidat is haram. Bidat is innovation. And Islam, a large faction of Islam believe in taqleed. Taqleed is the idea that you cannot use your akal. अकल पे दखल ना दो. जो अकल पे दखल सिर्फ जो इंटरप्रेटर है, जैसे हाफिज़ हो गए, ये उनका दखल है. सो तुम अकल नहीं लगा सकते इस्लाम पे.
Apparently, Waqf is the third largest landowner in India, and almost no one knows this. And I've read that the Indian Parliament building itself was claimed as Waqf property. Is that documented?
I think because see, Delhi, I mean, okay, so as per the canonical Islamic or Ashrafi view, the whole of India is Waqf. right? Why? Because it was conquered by Islam, just like Spain is Waqf, right?
What is Waqf for someone who has never heard of the word? And then explain this to me. A 2000-year-old Hindu temple was claimed as Waqf land. Islam is 1400 years old. How is that legally possible in India?
No, I mean, okay, so to take the point of view of Islam, let's say, Islam existed all along since the creation of this universe. It's just that it got revealed in some point in history. So it was there all along.
Okay. Okay. The biggest Hindu temple in the world is in Cambodia, not in India. What does that tell you about the scale of civilization that exists before the invasions that you document?
Right. I mean, that means something. That means that, as I've written about the Mathura temple, right? I mean, there used to be large temples in the North India as well, which got destroyed by the marauders, right, and invaders. It also says that if there is a very big temple outside, let's say the canonical Hindu land, it says that, okay, so it was probably, and there is no history of bloodshed when these sort of things were made, right? It means that Hinduism is a very liquid, it is a very adaptable and all-inclusive belief that can be actually applied to the whole world to bring world peace for real.
You mentioned about reversing the genocide, Ghar Wapsi. How realistic is the large-scale reconversion, and what is the actual mechanism for the same? Is this another reverse genocide that you plan on doing?
No, reversing the genocide is a technical, I mean, it's a term which is used by the genocide researcher. Reversing the genocide means, okay, so what is so genocide is a cyclic process. So you commit a genocide, then you whitewash the history to lay the foundation of another genocide, and this cycle go on and on. Reversing the genocide means reversing this process, right? Now, reversing the genocide, Hindu genocide in India, it does not only involve Ghar Wapsi, it is even more than that. As I have discussed already in the initial part of our podcast, that it is reversing the genocide is the first and foremost step, acknowledging and reversing it, to attain decolonization. The Hindu genocide in India did not only kill Hindus, it destroyed a large number. I mean, that is the intent of the genocide as defined by genocide, right? But by Raphael Lemkin, that you not only kill people, you kill their culture, their institution, their education, right? Their babies. You convert babies from one group to another group. You prevent birth of babies in a certain group. All these things, specifically the destruction of culture, our spirituality, our institutions, they need to be decolonized, and reversing the genocide in this sense has a much broader context than Ghar Wapsi. Now, talking about Ghar Wapsi, right, you have to understand that for example, so in India, right, there is this Ashraf, who were the foreign invaders who came to India, were like nearly 5%, I guess. A large section of Indian Muslims are converted. Desi Musalmans, Desi Indians, who are called Pasmandas. Now, B.R. Ambedkar actually talks about this extensively in his book Pakistan or the Partition of India. Pasmandas, if you see, they have gone through double genocide. Why? Because like Hindus have gone through the destruction of their lives, their institution, etc., right? Pasmanda, on top of that, they have gone through the genocide of their own identity, right? So in this sense, we have to have a empathetic view on Pasmandas, on what they have gone through, and how we can help them out in order to reverse the genocide process, the genocidal processes that they have gone through. Right. So I can say a lot of things on that, but yeah. So these are because this is a question for rapid fire. Let's.
You have mentioned in the book, a wounded god is a dead god. One can always rebuild a temple over its old ruins and fight to reclaim its sacred space that was once illegally captured. But he cannot rebuild the image of his god as the icon of infinite, as the icon of infinite might once the icon itself gets wounded by the moral. So I think the reverse genocide means getting the dignity back.
Getting the dignity of your God back, actually, the dignity of your spirituality back. If you see that the zimmihood of Hindus, right, that inferior complex about himself, it is a result of 1,000 years of continuous genocidal processes on this race. So yeah, getting the dignity back, dignity of his god, his own psyche, because what is Hindu god? Hindu god lives inside a Hindu psyche, a Hindu mind, right? So once you get the dignity of yourself back, your god will also be dignified as before, will get dignified as before.
India and Israel, two civilizations targeted for demographic erasure over centuries. How did the Jewish people preserve identity and security under the sustained pressure? And what is the specific lessons Hindus haven't implemented yet?
So, I mean, again, different culture, different belief, different ideology. You need to understand that Judaism also come under Abrahamism. And again, because Abrahamic morality is basically historiocentric morality, unlike Hindu morality, which is natural morality. It has a natural convention. It did not start at a very specific point, 0 AD, and darkness before that, right? It does not believe in. So the template is different. Maybe both the races have gone through genocides, that's why the parallels are being drawn. But to build the nation, to decolonize Indian society, in my belief, we cannot go the Jewish way. It would not be right.
It goes against the foundations of
Right.
Okay. In a world of WhatsApp forwards and AI-generated content, as we saw with Gemini, and narrative warfare, how does a common citizen verify what you're claiming? And what is the framework your book actually gives, to distinguish between documented history from propaganda?
Right. So this book that I have worked on, it cites, because it is written with academic rigor, cites like the first-hand references, including books like Masir Alamgiri. Now, what is Masir Alamgiri? So Masir Alamgiri, during Aurangzeb's time, Aurangzeb used to give a large number of farmans, right? So they used to be consolidated in the form of a, let's say, modern day newspaper, right? Now, Masir Alamgiri is there. It has been translated by Sir Jadunath Sarkar. In fact, I think Jadunath Sarkar got knighted because of this work. So these are first-hand references that I have used, and some of them are like Aludbi, Barani, Albiruni, right? So these are first-hand Islamic historians who are talking about all these incidents. And also, if there are any parallel nuances, I have also mentioned that in my book. So because I have written from primary references and primary historical records, I believe it will bear some value in the academic arena.
Considering the recent incident of Tarun Kumar in Delhi, where he was killed because his sister, during the occasion of Holi, and the water from the water balloon accidentally fell on a Muslim woman, and for that Tarun Kumar was killed. What are your views on this, and how do you think Bajrang Dal reacted to it?
Right. So let me tell you one more important aspect, one more important part of history that I mentioned in my book, which is related to that. So Indian Muslims historically, even in 1800s, they used to be very different than the rest of the Muslim world. I have to acknowledge this, and I have acknowledged this in my book with proper references. Like there's a book named Indian Musalman by. Just go through the references, so basically Indian Musalmans were as diverse as Hindus, obviously, right, in the Indian subcontinent, which was as big as the Western Europe, and they were as diverse and as cultural. Some of the Muslims used to maintain temples. Okay, they used to have their own temples. There's this Menon community who used to worship Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. They used to be Shakahari, vegetarian. And they used to say Jai Tridev. Okay? So Indian Muslims community, like the Pasmanda community mainly, they used to be Mandir Pujak, Murti Pujak, used to say Ram Ram, had their own temples. What changed? It is a very important question. The thing that changed is obviously the British and Ashrafi nexus and the administrative policy, the divide and rule policy that were fed into this system. Now, this is a lesson for the current Indian government and dispensation, that you should bring uniform rules, law and order. You should not play like divide and rule, us and them. Ki law will be different for some section and it will be different for some other section, just because some other section can create a mob, come to street. You should not do this. Like uniform law and order, right, is the prerequisite to bring harmony in a country. You see Indian Muslims who used to be quote unquote mushriks, right, in the eyes of Islam, but they are happy. I mean, but then over time you see these many riots and these many unhappy incidents. Muslims used to play Holi. Now, so at the time of Aurangzeb, for example, there is this guy Shah Waliullah. So after Aurangzeb, it was a period of depression for Ashrafs, right? Ki people were doing Ghar Wapsi and all these things. They were losing their belief in Islam. But Shah Waliullah wrote that we have to create a vertical split between the Hindu and Muslims, Hindus and Pasmandas, in the dimension of culture, in the dimension of their faith and belief, and how they celebrate their religion. So Muslims, for example, used to do Ganga Snan. That got banned. Murti Puja got banned. Right? So you have to tackle the Ashraf who are like merely less than 5% and who are driving the Indian politics, at least the Islamic side of politics. You have to handle them. You have to tell them that they cannot say like 10 minute पुलिस गायब कर दो तो पुलिस हटा दो तो लोगों को गायब कर देंगे. These are genocidal speeches. Just like we will dismantle Sanatan. This goes against the United Nations Genocide Prevention Act, which has not been acted by. So India जब 1946-48 में ये बन रहा था, इंडिया जाके वहाँ ज्ञान दे के आया था, बट इंडिया अपने यहाँ पे इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं किया. क्यों नहीं किया? इंडिया में जेनोसाइड प्रिवेंशन लॉ क्यों नहीं है? ये कैसे हो सकता है कि कोई भी क्या ब्राह्मण भारत छोड़ो, ब्राह्मण मुक्त भारत, 10 मिनट में पुलिस हटा दो तो ये कर देंगे वो कर देंगे, सनातन को ख़त्म करो, डेंगू मलेरिया है. दीज आर जेनोसाइडल स्पीचेस. दीज आर पनिशेबल एज पर द यूनाइटेड नेशंस जेनोसाइड प्रिवेंशन एक्ट, जो इंडिया में लागू नहीं हुआ है. सो अगर हारमोनी लाना है, इस तरह की चीज़ों से इंडिया को बचाना है, तो उस हिसाब से आई थिंक गवर्नमेंट को बिहेव करना होगा और इन चीज़ों को इम्प्लीमेंट करना होगा.
इट्स इंटरेस्टिंग हाउ द इंडियन मुसलमान वेंट फ्रॉम डूइंग गंगा स्नान टू नाउ
killing this guy.
Yeah. Why do you think in a lot of these European nations do Muslims do namaz in public spaces, where in Arab nations they usually do not do that? What do you think? Does it have a deeper meaning, or is it just because they have lack of mosques?
Right. Now, these are like people-specific questions. Till now, we have discussed about the ideology. Okay, what is Ashrafism, what is Islam or Abrahamism and all these things. Now, I frankly saying, like, I can give you an answer which is provocative. But I don't know what is going on in the guy who is reading namaz there, right? Neither can I quote any scripture that says ki you do that. In fact, there exists Islamic literature which says that do not read namaz if it hampers someone's activity. Yes, it is there. And so in this regard, Arabs are obeying Islam and these countries are actually not obeying Islam.
One word after everything. Do you have hope?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I'm writing this book, I'm writing out of hope and not despair, right? um, because if you want to see, you have to understand, like, India is working so nice, right? And it is almost magical. And whatever you call it, 0.5 front, fifth front, and fifth column, and all these words that are coming around, I would say that as citizens we have to believe in sympathy for each. I mean, we have to have empathy and sympathy to fellow citizens. All these designs of state and, let's say, Abrahamic doctrines and these things, they are not there to do good for us. We have to understand. I mean, these Abrahamic doctrines, these Ashrafi doctrines in the case of Islam, let's say, they are not doing any good for Muslims in the subcontinent. I mean, if you look at Pakistan, right, what they are going through, because Pakistan is really like Ashrafism on steroid, right? And you see I mean, if bidat is haram, if innovation is haram, and if you implement that in a country, just imagine how fatal that is for the destiny of that country. अगर कोई इंडिया चांद पे जा रहा है और पाकिस्तान का कोई बंदा मुल्ला बोल रहा है कि भाई कि चांद पे तो जा नहीं सकते क्योंकि वहाँ पैर नहीं रख सकते, फॉर वट एवर इस्लामिक रीज़न, राइट? आई मीन, दीज आर स्टूपिड थिंग्स दैट आर गोइंग ऑन. तो इससे कोई ऐसे डॉक्ट्रिन से, जिसको एटाविस्ट डॉक्ट्रिन बोलते हैं, जो बिल्कुल ही पुराने 1400 साल पहले क्या हुआ था, 2000 साल पहले कैसे हुआ था, क्या हुआ था, उसी पे अटके रहेंगे, उससे फ़ायदा नहीं होता, राइट? बिदत तो चाहिए, इनोवेशन तो चाहिए, अकल तो लगाना है. और वो अगर प्रो ह्यूमैनिटी एंटी अशरफिज्म है तो देन ऑल्सो, इवन देन यू शुड वेलकम दोज थिंग्स.
Which is the hardest chapter in the book? Which was...
Oh, for me, because I'm a Bengali, the genocide in Bangladesh, like the history of Bangladesh from 1947 to 1971, and after that, 1974, Mujibur Rahman got killed, assassinated, and the whole rape genocide of Bengali women, horrible chapters. I mean, because see, when I'm writing about, let's say, Multan, right, it doesn't actually exist in Hindu memory as such. Multan used to be a very spiritual place because it was the place where the Nrsimha avatar actually came to earth, right? Just like Ram Mandir, Multan was another place where avatar actually descended, right? But Multan का भी कोई memory नहीं है हमारे पास as such. But जब बांग्लादेश की चीज़ें लिख रहा था मैं, because we know these places, लोग कैसे हैं, खान पीन क्या है, वहाँ रिवर्स क्या है, कल्चर कैसा है, बिकॉज वी नो सो मच ऑफ बांग्लादेश, आई कुड सी हैपनिंग इट देयर, राइट? या फिर डायरेक्ट एक्शन डे इन कोलकाता. सो दोज चैप्टर्स एक्चुअली डिस्टर्ब्ड मी अ लॉट.
आई हैव रेड द बुक माई सेल्फ and there are a lot of sources that were attached. The best part of the book was the sources,
right,
for all the gory crimes that were committed. And I can only imagine how it was as an author for you to write the book. I still have more than 20 to 30 questions to ask, but I think with this note telling about, anticipating the next version of the book, and with all the questions that we answered today, this would be a good way to end the podcast.
Sure.
And we really hoped, host you again.
Thank you.
Have another round of extremely long conversation touching about.
I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah. So I think that concludes the podcast, and thank you, Bijeet.
Thank you.
And thank you for the audience for staying with us till now.